So we're really pleased to have you here today. And as you know, I mean, I'm probably saying what you already know. We represent businesses of all types and sizes, as well as businesses who are people who consider themselves and operate as self-employed. And yeah, we're very lucky to have you here today, and we want to make this a quarterly event, and thank Mike for getting in touch to get things moving very quickly. So let's go to some of the questions that we had, and start with getting your perspective, because what we can do is disseminate that out amongst the business community and get some feedback that we can feed back to you. So moving on to, firstly, welcome again. And in respect of Twickenham and budget and business, so we're interested to hear which parts of the budget you feel have worked well and which haven't worked so well. So please,
well,
over to you, Munira.
Thank you very much, Anne, for having me today, and always delighted to meet with local businesses and business representatives. I know you're going to run through a series of questions with me, which I'll give a few thoughts on. But for me, the most valuable thing, Andrew, today would be for me to hear back from businesses in the area about the concerns and the questions that they have, so that can inform what I'm then doing, both at a national level and a local level, to champion and support our local businesses. So in terms of what I felt was positive coming out of the budget, well, I was delighted, of course, to see that the various business support schemes were extended, not least the furlough scheme, as well as the self-employed income support scheme. I mean, clearly we would be having a much bigger problem with unemployment at the moment if those schemes were not in place. That said, I think it would have been helpful if they'd been announced sooner. I think there have been so many different announcements extending things at various points, which have caused a number of cliff edges as we've gone along, and so therefore we know that a number of businesses have had no option but to make people redundant before announcements have come forward. So and I also think we're potentially heading towards another cliff edge come September, with these schemes ending then just as businesses are really hopefully starting to get going again. So I think ideally I would have liked to see those extended for a bit longer than what has been announced. In terms of what I was very disappointed about, and would like to have heard about, and this is something I've had a lot of representations about from constituents and small businesses in the constituency, is support for the so-called excluded. And although often people think the 3 million people excluded from support were largely self-employed people, I think, yes, the majority were self-employed, but there's also directors of limited companies as well in there, who I'm sure a number of those are members of the Chambers of Commerce. And although the self-employed income support scheme has now been extended to some of the newly self-employed who were left out of the first round, that's only a small proportion of those 3 million. And I continue to hear from small business owners who are eating through their savings, eating through their reserves, and quite apart from the personal impact on these individuals about in terms of not being able to access any financial support, the mental health impacts, the strains on relationships, going into personal debt. For me, it makes no economic or business sense. I led a debate on this very topic and challenged the minister back in December on it. And one of the things I tried to make as forcefully as I could, one of the points I tried to make was, these are small businesses who are going to be absolutely key to our recovery. So not supporting them now is going to really struggle. They're going to really struggle to get going again. And I think of one example in the travel industry, a constituent who's a director of a small company. She's already had to lay off her 5 staff members that she had. She's eating her way through her reserves to support herself and her family. But she also said, to be able to get my business going again once the travel sector opens up, it would be really helpful if I could employ somebody quickly again, but I'm going to need some support to do that. And actually the recovery of my business will be slower without that support. So I'd like to see much more there. In terms of small businesses more broadly, I mean, obviously I'm pleased about the restart grants that the Chancellor announced, but I still think for many small businesses, particularly in our high streets, particularly in somewhere like London, where the business rates are so high and therefore that limited eligibility for a lot of the support schemes before now, having a more ambitious small business support scheme that was perhaps linked to their loss of revenue would have been a better way to go. And I know you specifically asked about, from a Twickenham perspective, I mean, it was very obvious to see throughout the budget speech that this Chancellor and this government are very much focused on everything outside of London.
Agreed.
And the number of name checks for constituencies in the north of England about where they were investing and complete disregard for London, I find thoroughly depressing. And I feel there is what they call the levelling up agenda, I see as frankly, as a levelling down agenda against London, and I will continue to speak up against that as a London MP. So there are sort of a few thoughts on those announcements, what was there and what was missing a few weeks ago.
From the Chamber of Commerce perspective, that is a concern of chambers and the London Chamber of Commerce, so chambers across London. The levelling up is completely ignoring the fact that London is the engine and being completely ignored. I mean, even down to, for example, export hubs where you can get specific businesses, can get specific help for overseas trade. Nothing in London. So they've put offices all over the country, but nothing in London. So we completely concur with you on that point. And Sarah made a point earlier, Sarah Olney, about the fact that there are certain high streets around the country and places across the country that are getting assistance and others not. And it would be quite good to see some... I presume she was talking about the Future High Streets Fund.
Exactly.
Was she? Yes.
All of that stuff is very much geared towards, those new seats the new constituencies that the Conservatives are one that they're keen to keep.
So there we go. It's political. Yeah. Okay. So thank you for that. And then moving on, what would you've said what you would like to have heard from. Is there anything else that you would like to have heard from the Chancellor?
Well, I would like to have seen more ambition in terms of the environment and tackling climate change, in terms of green infrastructure investment, because not only is it the right thing to do, but given the climate emergency that we face and the net zero targets we have to meet, I think it makes sense in terms of trying to stimulate that recovery. And we know that there is going to be a massive shift in terms of the industries. Clearly around here, we've seen a lot of businesses and individuals suffer from the impact on the aviation industry and the travel sector, given our proximity to Heathrow. At some point, when international travel restrictions begin to ease, who knows when that might be, because clearly a lot of countries around us are in a far worse situation with the virus than we are. It will take a very, very long time, I think, for the aviation sector to recover. And I personally don't think it will ever fully recover. And therefore, there are going to have, there needs to be much bigger, bolder, ambitious investment in green transport domestically, as opposed to cutting domestic air passenger duty, but also in terms of greening our homes, insulating every home and so on, renewable energy. There's so many things that need to be done, and which could help create new jobs, and we need to have sort of reskilling package to go alongside that. And yes, there was there were some green announcements, but I would like to have seen them be much more ambitious.
Yes. The aviation industry is something that we've had our eye on as well, because so many jobs are, as you said, and businesses are reliant on that across our area.
Yeah.
So it's something, and I know that Heathrow and BA are getting more involved now that with the reopening with the London Chambers. So we'll have our ear to the ground on some of the discussions going on in respect to that and government and where it leads. But I think you're right. I think it's dented the air industry for some time until they can get green solutions off the ground and we can get through this COVID situation. I think you're right.
And that's where I think some sector specific packages that think much more specifically about the challenges that each individual sector faces, because we know travel and aviation is going to take much longer to get off the ground. And you know, being blunt, and I don't know if there's anybody on the call from that sector, given what I said about the virus, you've just got to look at what's happening in France, Germany and elsewhere. But actually, if we want to get our economy and society open here, we are going to have to be still very, very restrictive in terms of the public health measures at our borders, in terms of who comes in and out. Now, we may have to take that, therefore that sector will continue to suffer disproportionately in order that our domestic economy can reopen again. And therefore, if they are having to take that hit to allow the rest of the economy to get going, then it is, you know, government is duty bound, I think, to provide a bespoke package of support, which, you know, as I said about, you know, my strong commitment to the environment, I would like to see that come with some environmental conditions attached. Nonetheless, I think it does need a bespoke package of support, because, you know, we still need a travel industry, we still need an aviation industry. We want to be trading internationally. It's really important that that we make sure that we still support that industry, albeit in an environmentally responsible way.
And I think there's international pressure coming down through banks and finance supply chains that will see a more green and responsible, sustainable perspective on all sorts of areas of business and policy. So I think it's all coming our way. And the sooner, well, we are embracing it reasonably quickly in the UK, but I suppose we've got so much old infrastructure, haven't we, that we've got to deal with.
And just a brief word on some other sector-specific areas. I mean, live events, for instance, will obviously also take longer to get going. Hospitality, I think clearly that'll take longer to get going again. So I think some specific bespoke support. And I did call out in one of the speeches that I made during the budget debate around hairdressing and personal care. I mean, I think it's fantastic that the hospitality sector has had its VAT cut extended. I would like to have seen something similar for hairdressers and the personal care sector. Bizarrely, just a little anecdote, when I heard from some people from the sector at a cross-party group meeting I was attending, and I said, well, you've obviously been trying to lobby ministers about this. What has been their reason to refuse you that cut? And they said, well, they said it's something to do with the way that we're coded the same as funeral directors, apparently. And I just beggars belief. I mean, it's a computer says no moment, really, isn't it?
Yes, completely.
So there was that, and
sounds like Whitehall.
They were told they were not as well, they weren't all speaking with one voice or as well organised as, say, the pub industry, which, again, comes down to lobbying, doesn't it? And it's
something we've been lobbying on, some of our members is having a hospitality minister, and that could be extended to hospitality, retail and whatever, in order to give them the focus they need. It probably makes sense, doesn't it, if these because you're right, they aren't organised in the same way as some of the other areas. Completely. Okay, and just looking down the notes, extension of furlough clearly, and self-employment support schemes. Well, you lobbied very hard along with Sarah on that, and that we did get some additional monies through for the excluded, but there's more to be done, as you've said earlier.
Yeah, far more.
Yeah. And the challenges during the next phase of COVID, one of our listeners on the call did ask the question about the vaccines and the situation with Europe. So the roadmap and the COVID. So do you have some comments to make around that area? without being too specific?
Yeah, so with regards to the roadmap, I mean, I think whilst I know many people, I mean, myself included, let's face it, we're all pretty fed up of these restrictions and having to meet in the way that we're meeting today, but also fed up, clearly if you've got a business, you want to be out there trading and getting back on your feet again. So I think obviously we're all frustrated with the speed at which things are moving. However, I would say given the lessons we've learned from the virus over the last year, I overall, in terms of the speed of the roadmap, I'm largely supportive at the rate at which it's been proposed that we reopen parts of the economy and society. I think, what needs to happen is to have the right level of financial support to go hand in hand with that, which is obviously those are some of the points we've just touched on. So what I'd really like to hear from people on the call, if there's any from the hospitality sector, what their feelings are in particular about this idea of COVID passports or certificates for people going to pubs and restaurants. I have very clear views on that, which some of those on the call may have heard, but I'd be interested to know if you're a publican or a restaurateur, how you feel about having to manage that sort of scheme if it were proposed, or whether you would actually want to introduce one yourself. In terms of other specific challenges for businesses coming up, I think the fact that the period for the VAT deferral payments from last year is coming to an end, and people need to start paying back now. I'm really concerned about that, because obviously a lot of businesses haven't even reopened again yet, and the fact that those things VAT payments need to start being paid back, even if you're sort of doing it on an instalment basis. That's still cash that's got to go out the door when you're either still closed or struggling to get going again. And I know similarly on the bounce back loans, the interest-free period is coming to an end shortly. So those will start accruing interest, and therefore, cost businesses are already indebted, then for that to be compounding further, with capital payments starting to be having to be made in 6 months' time, again, when I think businesses will still be in a very fragile state. So I'm concerned about that. Again, I'd be really keen to hear from those on the call how you feel about that, how you're going to be impacted by that.
Okay. So do we? We'll just pause there, and then we can go on to the last. Actually, no, we'll carry on if you don't mind, and then we can go back to these questions at the end. So thinking about Twickenham in particular, what are your concerns about Twickenham going forward?
Well,
Munira?
I mean, and obviously, when we say Twickenham, we're talking about the constituency, which covers Twickenham and Whitton and the Hamptons and St Margaret and so on. I mean, I think broadly, some of the challenges I've talked about in terms of the small businesses in our high streets getting going again, they're my main concerns. I think they would apply, in this area, regardless. I'm slightly torn, because I think given the demographics of our area, I think whilst obviously there are a number of people, and I've seen this from the claimant numbers, local claimant numbers that come through, those people who've gone on to universal credit has doubled in the last year. But my impression is a lot of people in this area have managed to keep earning and working through, not necessarily obviously business owners, but people who are employed, because of the nature of the jobs that they do. They've been working from home and continuing to earn money. Therefore, I think there will be a number of people locally where there will be a lot of unspent cash in the bank. And I hope that as businesses start to open, that pent-up demand will mean that people start buying again. I'll give you one example. I live in Whitton, and after the first lockdown, I did a tour of a number of high streets around the constituency, talking to businesses on their high streets. Yeah. And here in Whitton, there's a lovely jeweller called L. Guess & Co. And when I went to visit them, they said to me, I can't remember exactly what the stat was, but I think they've done several months worth of business in 1 week, the first week after they reopened.
Yeah, interesting.
So,
yes.
So I have some level of optimism, because I think there is, given the demographics of our area, I think we're probably not as hard hit as other areas in terms of unemployment. So I think there will be quite a lot of consumer demand. However, we could see a further spike in unemployment later in the year. So I'm slightly concerned about the sort of medium to long term situation for Twickenham businesses. I think the fact that people are not going to rush back to offices anytime soon, and I think we could end up seeing a hybrid model of working longer term between home and office, I hope might see the revival of our high streets, actually. And I'm really pleased that the council is working on an ambitious scheme for Twickenham Riverside, because I think that will help regenerate the riverside. Because, to come back to your question about my concerns, I am seeing more and more empty shops in Twickenham town centre, for instance, and equally here in Whitton, I've seen a few. So yeah, a mixture of thoughts there about the sort of future of small businesses. But again, this is why I want to hear from businesses locally to help me identify where I haven't necessarily spotted concerns and challenges that businesses are facing locally.
Yes, and we can certainly continue to feed back on that subject. So, and then do you have any good news to report?
Yeah, well, there are a couple of businesses, interestingly, because you don't really think of Twickenham as a manufacturing sort of place, but I don't know if you're aware, but there are a couple of businesses that have approached me recently. One, which is a really, really exciting business, particularly given my background in the life sciences industry. There's Touchlight Genetics that you might have heard of down in Hampton, who are based in the old waterworks building on the Sunbury Road. And yes, they are expanding massively. They make synthetic RNA, which is used in the development and manufacturing of vaccines and medicines. They've been quite involved in the COVID vaccination efforts with various industry partners. They're also involved with industry and research partners in terms of cancer medicines and flu vaccines and all sorts. And given the demand, and given that the UK is now really starting to build much more of a capability in this area following the pandemic, I know that they are looking to expand their manufacturing. What they're manufacturing is tiny. I mean, this is not heavy industry. It's microscopic in size what they're manufacturing, so they can manufacture vast amounts in quite a small space. So I'm really excited to hear about that. And equally, the Real Ale in Twickenham, they had their first shop in East Twickenham, and they've got a few other shops around London. I know that they are looking to build a manufacturing capability, not necessarily in the constituency, but because they were founded here and the business owner lives here. They approached me about the fact that they're looking for space, close to Heathrow and the A4 and so on, where they can be bottling for other businesses as well. So
they've done really well, haven't they?
So it's really exciting to hear about those sorts of businesses right here on our doorstep. And someone like Touchlight they'll be locally very strategically important because of the jobs that they're creating and the knock-on impact that has on the local economy. But obviously they're nationally very important in terms of strategically important for our national capability in this area. And let's wait to see who ends up successfully bidding for the Nella Hall site, because that'll be interesting to see what we have coming forth there in terms of potential businesses.
Yes, hopefully a good head office or whatever. Yes,
possibly. And of course, we've just had that £15 million investment in Twickenham Studios in St Margaret's, which is also really good news, and I hopefully will have a good positive knock-on impact for the St Margaret's and Twickenham area in terms of footfall and so on.
hugely significant, and yes, hugely significant, with great plans for the future, both nationally again. So very exciting. Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with you completely. It's great news for the Twickenham constituency.
Yeah.
And we have new businesses, so there are a number of people beginning to come talk about launching new businesses. They're coming to speak to us at the Chamber of Commerce.
That's
Really
great.
exciting businesses. So I agree with you. It's great. You know, so hopefully we've got we can continue the prosperity that we have now. And is there anything else that I've omitted?
No,
I think
no,
we've
I mean,
covered
I've posed
everything.
a series of questions as I've been speaking. I mean,
Absolutely.
the only
Let's
other
go back.
topic we haven't touched on is Brexit, and I don't know if there's anybody on the
Please.
call. There was nothing I really particularly wanted to comment on, other than obviously there are lots of stories about the challenges, particularly in terms of red tape, for businesses that are exporting or importing to and from Europe. Or mainland Europe, I should say. And so I'd just like to hear if there is anybody on the call who's affected by that.
I can say that from a London perspective, we have seen issues, definitely. They consider that these things will, I mean, the London Chamber of Commerce do consider that these issues will iron out, but we do have an awful lot of businesses approaching, and please push them our way if they've got red tape issues. Because we can resolve those quite quickly and easily within our Chamber of Commerce.
Oh, that's helpful to know. I had a meeting with a local business a few weeks ago is a chocolatier who was struggling to ship.
Food is a biggie. Yeah, so get him to get in touch with us. Yes, if you can, if that's possible. Yeah. So some of the questions you had, going back over them, is there anyone here who like to, we've got David Hawkins on the call. Would you like to answer any of the questions Munira placed, or make any comments? I will just unmute you. There you go.
Well, not really, actually. I think I had a few questions in the back of my mind, and they've all actually been covered through the questions you've asked yourself. So thank you very much for that.
It's been brilliant, very comprehensive.
Oh, well, David, where's your business? Whereabouts are you based? What do you do?
I'm the managing director of Butterworth Laboratories. So we're actually in the pharmaceutical business. We do analytical chemistry testing. So we've been very fortunate that we've had to remain operational throughout the last 12 months. Obviously, that's presented its own particular issues, but we're certainly not, being confronted with some of the issues that many businesses have. We've remained operational, and we've sort of kept going through thick and thin. So it's been an interesting time for us, but I think quite clearly it's been a lot harder for many other businesses.
Yeah.
Did you say it was Butterworth Laboratories, David?
That's correct. Yes. We're in Teddington.
Okay. Oh, I've not visited you. Well, obviously, I've not visited many places in the last year. It'd be great once I'm allowed out and about again to come and meet with you and see what you do.
It'd be an absolute pleasure. Yes, I'll get in contact.
Get the red carpet out.
That'd be great, because I before lockdown I went to LGC and I mentioned Touchlight Genetics, and I'm hoping to go and see them. I'm just, given my background in pharma and life sciences, I mean, I'm interested in all businesses, but clearly I've got personal interest in life sciences businesses, just given my background. So that'd be great to see you.
Yeah.
It'd be very, very interesting for you to come and visit and have a look around. I think it'd be beneficial, and certainly it's always good to have people come around when, of course, we're allowed to. We should be patient on that.
And the positive to mention here, David, is the extension that you've made, and also the work you're doing in respect to testing and the how that's within the vaccination supply chain.
Yeah, that's correct. We've had for quite some time now planned a building extension on the front, a new office area on the front of our site, and of course when COVID started, we did sort of pause for thought, and obviously it did have quite an impact on the building trade. But throughout it all, we've gradually made progress through it, and actually we're just getting to the point where we're completing that work. 16th of April, I'm told, is the completion time for that, and that's really going to help us sort of accommodate a lot of our sort of our facilities with sample storage and samples in, but also give a little bit extra space for the people working in the lab. And yeah, and one of the reasons why we've remained operational is that many of the companies who are our clients have been developing COVID, not only vaccines, but also COVID treatments as well. We test mostly raw materials, but we are very much in the, in the support network for the manufacture and production of these COVID vaccines. So it's been an interesting time for us because, we've seen the development of these products throughout. And yeah, certainly at the moment, we're seeing quite a lot of work coming through supporting that manufacture.
And do you have any issues with Brexit that you want to raise?
Not really. I think the only issues really been touched on where we've tried to import materials, particular reference materials, funny enough, actually, from the European Union, the European reference standards. We've had a few little hiccups with that, getting things through customs. We've had some customers who have been unclear from their end as to what to do with regard to getting things over through to us, and we've had to provide assistance to them on that. And in fact, we've been very fortunate. We have some very good courier companies who obviously know their business, and so we very quickly got in contact with them, and we set up an agreement with them that they would handhold our customers through the process, and that's proven to be quite a useful feature, actually.
And you're sponsoring our Best Environmental Sustainability Award, and I know you are very, very keen on that. So do you agree with Munira? Well, what is your view? Sorry, a more open question about the budget and that.
Yes, and I think Sarah also touched on it quite in quite a lot of detail as well. And yes, for us, I mean, we're very much conscious that we work in a chemical industry. So we have a quite a heavy toll of conscience on our shoulders around that. And like all businesses, we can do an awful lot more. I mean, we're working greatly on that. In fact, I should have just joined a green accreditation scheme to really drive our own initiatives further. I think certainly the observation was made that all the parties are now really taking a much keener focus on climate change, and certainly the events with Brexit and COVID have taken the spotlight off that a little bit, and it's good to see that this hasn't been forgotten about amongst all the complex issues that we've had to deal with over the last 12 months. And it's really good that there are elements of it in the budget, and clearly all the parties are taking a very keen interest in it. And that will hopefully encourage further developments going forward.
Okay, cool. And Teddington, I mean, you're on the doorstep of Teddington. What do you think about the high street in terms of as and when your people come back? Well,
I mean, a lot of our people have been on site, particularly people in the laboratories. They have to come in and work. I think Teddington's rather typical of many high streets. I think in particular Teddington seems to be a lot of very small businesses, cell phone businesses and cafes and things. And I know that a lot of them have been keeping busy providing sort of takeaway services, sandwich shops and things like that when they've been able to. Clearly it's an important part of what makes Teddington the nice place to work. And as a business, we're very keen to see a recovery in that area. It also encourages and helps us recruit people because they come along for an interview and they see that's a very nice area and they think this is somewhere where I want to come and work. So it all helps the overall environment.
Okay, that's brilliant. Munira, do you have any more questions of David?
Not specifically of David, other than I'll ask my team to set something up as and when we can to come and visit.
Yeah, absolute pleasure. Absolutely.
I didn't realise you were right here on my doorstep, so great.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Fine. And Gerard, you haven't put your hand up. I'm going to unmute you. There you go. Any observations or comments about the budget, particularly or Brexit or Twickenham?
Hi, Anne. I just had one question. Good afternoon now, I guess.
Yes, absolutely.
So I just had really one question, which was support for local businesses for business rates. What are the options available at the moment? We're based. My office is based in Twickenham, in Teddington, just round the corner from the labs, actually, off Aldergrave Road. Nice new building, by the way. We've sort of downsized into one office rather than two. We're essentially serviced offices. What options are there for us for rate rebates? Because we haven't been using the office except on sort of very rare occurrences over the last year.
So in terms of the rate relief scheme, I presume, I mean, I don't know what size, Gerard, your premises are, but are you over the threshold for being able to apply?
We're under the threshold, and we did apply, but we just got a bill back, which was rather bizarre.
Okay, well, that doesn't make sense to me, because I know that clearly there was rate relief, and I should have said, actually, that's one of the things I would like to have seen in the budget, is for an extension of business rates for relief, particularly for small businesses, for the whole of this next financial year. But if you believe you're eligible and you've been knocked back, can I ask you to perhaps send me the details, and I'll ask my office to take it up, because presumably you put your application into Richmond Council.
Correct, yes.
Okay, well then, so it's hard for me to comment without knowing the specifics and looking into it, but I'd be happy to do that. Gerard, what is your business, by the way?
We're a digital agency. We've been going sort of 23 years in Teddington, and so we build websites, web applications, and work for a large number of organisations from charities through to UK government, devolved governments, and some manufacturing industry too.
Oh, fantastic! And how big are you? How many people do you?
We've got about 8 permanent staff, and then an army of associates and partners to extend the team. Well, we've been fortunate that we've been able to work remotely. We had all the infrastructure already set up, and so it's actually in our industry been an easy transition. Although when the first lockdown came, everything went quiet because all the customers hadn't a clue what was going on. But more recently, businesses become quite busy as everybody is wanting to move everything online.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm sure. Oh, sorry, I didn't catch the name of your company.
It's called ActiveIS.
ActiveIS. Okay, great. Well, if you could perhaps send through some information, and we can look into your specific case. And again, as and when I'm allowed to get out and about, I'd love to pop in and see you. Perhaps I'll do it on the same day I'm visiting David's outfit. If you're just down the road.
Yeah, we are literally 100 meters, probably less than that, from each other. So yes.
Perfect.
That would be great.
Thank you very much. That's really kind.
I'm going to unmute Anthony Cook. He knows Twickenham very well, in case he's got any views or any observations. So budget, Brexit, Twickenham constituency. So I'm going to unmute you, Anthony. There we go. Sorry about this. Bear with me. Tony, can you unmute yourself, please? There we go. Is he unmuting? Maybe not. Maybe we've lost the will. I don't understand what's happened here. Okay, well, there we go. Tony, do you have any? Yes, perfectly well. Thank you very much.
Okay, no, my question is simply.
Thank you.
I think we're all agreed that a successful vaccination program is absolutely key. Not only to unlocking, if you like, the social side of this country, but most particularly the business side. Now, it would appear that the EU, in its various forms, is endeavouring to frustrate, one way and another, the UK vaccination programme, whether out of spite or what, who knows. But I just wonder what would be the attitude or the view of the EU's behaviour in this respect, because it is potentially going to damage this country hugely.
Well, I'll be frank with you. I'm extremely disappointed by what by how the EU Commission has responded to the challenges that it has experienced with AstraZeneca in terms of its supply. It's deeply ironic, given that a number of European leaders have undermined confidence in the AstraZeneca vaccine, and therefore they actually have quite a lot of stock in EU countries that goes unused. But the reason I'm disappointed is because vaccine nationalism does nobody any good. And this is a global pandemic, and it's a much overused phrase, but it is very true that nobody's safe till everyone's safe. And this is why I said in my earlier remarks that, although we are doing well on our vaccination programs, our numbers are low. I think really the biggest threat we face now is through import of further variants from those countries around us, because they are way behind in their vaccination programs. So what I'd like to see us doing is, instead of getting into any sort of vaccine or supply war with the European Union, is trying to find a way of working together to make sure that we all vaccinate our people between us, because they're so, our European neighbours are so critical to us in terms of trade and travel and so on. I'm not happy or impressed at all. And let's not forget, apart from the European Union and the UK, we've got some of the wealthiest countries in the world here that have actually brought up in advance a lot of the supply, and some of the poorest countries in the world haven't had a single vial. And again, we are all interconnected, and there is still some travel going on, and therefore until we make an effort working with international partners to make sure everybody gets vaccinated as quickly as possible, we won't be safe ourselves.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tony. I think that's all the questions. So can Mark launch our poll? Right, same. So it's asking Twickenham businesses. So let's see. So yes, it's similar to what we had with Sarah. Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you, everyone.
What was, sorry, I didn't see the poll results.
Do you not see it? Okay, no. Sorry. Oh, sorry. Oh, share results. That would be helpful, wouldn't it? There we go. Can you see it?
Yeah, I can.
Cool. Okay. So in principle, yes, but there are a few comments that you've made and Sarah have made that mark the turf. And it's a watching brief, isn't it, on some of the concerns we have around international trade into Europe, so everything around Brexit, COVID and the recovery, green, everything around green, and our town centre spaces, and those businesses that have struggled and will struggle to reopen, and those people who are struggling in the meantime. So we've got a number of different points to be aware of, and we will certainly hold these on a regular basis and get them into people's diaries on a quarterly basis, as discussed with Mike and also Nancy Baldwin on Sarah's team. So we'll make sure we get quarterly engagement going. And so we hear what your views are, but also you hear our views as well. You asked about hospitality, by the way. I think they would like. I think on the whole, what I'm hearing is they'd like the passports, and the travel industry would like them. But having said that, the views that I've heard from you, well, I heard from Sarah earlier, and I imagine you have, of avoiding a divided society, is one that I will explore further with these various, well, particularly hospitality, the care industry, travel, shops and retail, and find out what the views are and get back to you. Because I think that's sort of just hitting people, and I think they're just working it out at the moment.
I think there's a big difference between COVID passports or certificates for international travel versus the domestic use. And I think it's an inevitability that we'll need them for international travel, because other countries will doubtless put those barriers in place,
Yeah.
but I do have major concerns, not
Within the
not
UK.
just on the civil liberties basis, and the fact that I don't like the idea of having this two-tier society in terms of
Yeah.
access to goods and services. But also, I do think it will be a massive burden on businesses. And if you're, if you're just a local pub, in
Yes.
the local community here, the pressure that puts on you, and particularly your staff, in terms of policing that, as well as the costs involved, I think actually it is massively burdensome for businesses, as well as being ethically questionable.
Well, I used to work for De La Rue, and we're talking about counterfeited. So whatever's produced would have to be heavily anti-counterfeitable. So well, yeah. So that's not an easy one. It will be a cost to the state probably to create something, if we were to have it. But your perspective is very. I mean, we do have a largely held common view in the UK not to infringe civil liberties. So. We'll see. I'll explore it with the various directors and come back and let both you and Sarah know what their perspectives are on it, because I think they're just beginning to think about it.
Yeah, I'd be interested to hear, because certainly some of the business association, the trade associations for the pub industry yesterday were coming out quite strongly against them. So I'd be interested.
Well, there we go. Yeah.
If
the onus is on them, a bit like wearing masks, it's very difficult, isn't it, to tell people. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very, very, very much indeed for coming on the call, Munira Wilson, and I MP for Twickenham constituency. And I do apologise that we didn't have your image on, but the reason we set it up like this was because we had certain folk who were on the panel, their broadband wasn't coping, but we need to make sure next time we see you.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. And thanks everyone for participating. We really appreciate it. Thank you. And thank you, Munira, for your views. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.